January 2025, municipality of Novo in southwestern Para, a region where civilization ends and something far older begins. A group of 5 illegal loggers enters a protected area during the early hours of the morning. Experienced men who knew those trails like the back of their hands, equipped with state-of-the-art GPS devices, satellite radios, and years of survival experience in the jungle. At 3:47 a.m., the group leader sends a final radio transmission to base. He says something is surrounding them, that it isn't a known animal, and then he mentions the tracks that are going the wrong way. Moments later, only static. When the rescue team reaches the improvised camp 48 hours later, the scene is disturbing in its normality. There is no blood, no signs of struggle or confrontation. The tents are intact, backpacks neatly arranged, weapons loaded and leaning against the trees. The only anomaly is the chainsaw is abandoned in a semicircle and an impossible pattern of barefoot human footprints in the damp soil. Footprints that appear to be coming toward the camp, but when followed, lead deeper and deeper into the heart of the forest. To nowhere, to absolute emptiness. The 5 men are never found. Do you believe in folklore? Do you believe that stories told around a fire have any foundation in reality? Or are you the type who believes only in what can be seen, touched, and measured? Because what you are about to hear is not a fairy tale meant to lull children to sleep. It is not an urban legend shared on obscure internet forums. It is the complete dossier on the greatest predator of the Brazilian forests, an entity that has existed for millennia, documented since the 16th century, and that remains active in 2025. The Curupira is not confined to folklore books or elementary school lessons on Brazilian culture. It is out there, in regions where asphalt roads do not reach, where satellites capture only the endless green of the forest canopy, and it is waiting for you to make the first mistake. The fatal mistake of entering its territory without permission. To understand the Curupira, we must go back long before Brazil was called Brazil, before Pedro Álvares Cabral set foot on this land, before Europeans even dreamed of the gold and spices of the New World. The word comes from Old Tupi. Curu refers to grain, wart, or something that irritates the skin. Pir is the root for body, skin, shell. The literal translation can be understood as the body covered in sores or burning skin. Other linguists argue that the name means covered in pustules, a reference to the creature's wild and non-human appearance. The earliest accounts describe the Curupira as a paradoxical entity, a small body similar to that of an 8 or 9-year-old child, but with impossible musculature. Hair of a flaming red, the color of live embers, glowing in the darkness of the forest as if perpetually on fire, and strength equivalent to that of 20 adult men concentrated in that diminutive body. The first documented mention in Portuguese dates back to 1560. Father Anchieta, a Jesuit responsible for the catechization of indigenous peoples, wrote detailed letters describing an entity that the Tupi-Guarani feared more than any other danger of the forests. According to Anchieta, the indigenous people spoke of a demon that guarded the forests and punished those who took more than they needed. They called it Curupira and made offerings of tobacco and fermented drinks to appease its wrath. Even the bravest warriors refused to hunt in certain areas, claiming that the guardian with reversed feet dwelled there. And here lies the first major misconception of modern popular culture. The Curupira is not a child-friendly environmental hero. It is not a gentle, educational figure. For indigenous peoples, the Curupira is a chaotic and unpredictable force of nature. It does not act out of kindness, but out of territoriality, dominance, and ancestral vengeance. According to oral traditions preserved by shamans, the Curupira demands tribute from those who enter its domain. Hand-rolled tobacco leaves, fermented drinks, wild honey, dried meat, and above all, respect. Anthropologists and researchers from the National Institute for Amazonian Research confirm that the Curupira does not represent benevolent nature. It represents primal fear of psychological terror of being lost, alone and vulnerable in an environment that was never meant for humans. It does not protect individual trees. It punishes invasion. It condemns greed. It eliminates imbalance, and its methods are far more sophisticated and terrifying than direct violence. Its backward-facing feet are its most effective psychological weapon. Imagine being lost in the forest, exhausted, with the sun setting and panic tightening its grip. Then you see fresh human footprints in the mud. Hope, salvation. But as you follow them, you realize too late that every step has led you deeper into the forest, because those tracks were not leading out, they were leading in. The Curupira also masters vocal mimicry. It imitates human voices perfectly. It watches, listens, memorizes, and when a victim separates from the group, it calls out using the voice of someone familiar. Friends, relatives, children, long dead parents. This is not mere imitation. It is emotional manipulation. There are reports of people hearing their children crying in the forest, even knowing they were far away. Others heard mothers who had died years earlier calling for help. The Curupira finds vulnerability and exploits it without mercy. Another recurring element is the whistle. A sharp, almost ultrasonic sound described as coming from all directions at once. A sound that causes nausea, vertigo, mental confusion, and an irrational, uncontrollable fear. Acoustic analysts of recordings attributed to the phenomena indicate frequencies near the upper limit of human hearing, capable of producing exactly these symptoms. In 2025, the cases stop being mere ancient stories and begin to accumulate in official records. One of the most emblematic occurred in Altamira, Peru. Roberto Mendes Santos, an experienced hunter with over 20 years of forest survival experience, disappeared during a subsistence expedition near the Cachorra Sica indigenous territory. He was fully equipped, maintained regular contact with his wife, and showed no signs of difficulty. 3 days before his disappearance, Riverside residents reported hearing rhythmic pounding on tree trunks during the early morning hours, a sound known in local tradition as the beater, associated with the Curupira marking its territory. When the search team found the camp, everything was intact. The GPS was functioning perfectly. But when technicians analyzed data, they discovered something impossible. Roberto had spent 3 entire days walking in perfectly geometric circles around a single centuries-old tree, maintaining the exact same distance from the trunk, as if trapped in an invisible orbit. His body was never found. In Rondania, disappearances increased by 15% in forested areas in 2025. The patterns repeat. The victims were almost always involved in illegal activities. Equipment fails, compasses spin wildly, GPS devices freeze, and barefoot, small, backward-facing human footprints appear in the soil. In one such case, a chainsaw operator began walking in a trance into the forest, ignoring his co-workers' shouts. When they reached him, he claimed he was following his father, who had died more than a decade earlier. On the ground, dozens of reverse footprints circled the clearing where he had stood. There is also the theory of magnetism. According to Amazonian tradition, the Curupira possesses an abnormal concentration of iron that distorts the local magnetic field. Curiously, recent studies by the Federal University of Amazonas identified geomagnetic anomalies near very ancient trees. When cross-referenced with disappearance data, more than 60% occurred near these zones. In May 2025, an environmental researcher was using a drone equipped with a LIDAR sensor to map illegal deforestation in Rwanda. During a night flight, the equipment detected an unusual thermal signature, small, approximately 1.2 meters tall, with a body temperature slightly above the human average. The tracking system recorded the creature's speed, 60 kilometers per hour through dense forest. It ran without stopping for 8 minutes, avoiding obstacles with impossible precision. Then it stopped, turned its head directly toward the drone, and emitted a sound captured by the directional microphone. Engineers who analyzed the recording identified a modulated whistle of extremely high frequency, beginning at 18 kHz and rising progressively into the ultra